Hello everyone, this is the second lesson of configuring our instance. In the last lesson we looked at the basic configuration and tried to get a gateway error so that we can see the most common errors that a first-time user will have. But this time we're going to correct that error. It's just a change in the file or the way we wrote our configuration files. But to make it easier, I am going to start from the beginning and do everything in one run. So we have a lesson where we did things wrongly, and then we have a lesson when we do things correctly. Now, whenever you have a gateway error like we had in the last lesson, you want to look at your log files and see what the error is. Most of the time your error will be connection errors, but by now I am sure you have been able to play around to see the errors and be able to try to figure out what the error is about, and it's mostly an error of configuration. We created two main configuration files, one for the green unicorn and the Nginx configuration, and we are going to edit those files. But to make it easier, I'm going to start from the beginning and I will launch a new instance and walk through the reasoning behind all the decisions. So we'll click on launch instance and let me call this maternity records. We want an Ubuntu image here, and we want to select a key pair name. Let's just create new key pair and we will click on create. You want to save this in a location where you can easily find it. So let's put this key pair name as maternity records and create pair, and I want to save this on my desktop. Now we look at the network settings, and if you want to create a new security group, you want to allow HTTP traffic from the internet. I selected allow from anywhere. You can edit this in your real life project just to boost more security. You can also allow HTTPS traffic from the internet if you plan to configure SSL. Then we just launch instance because the other configurations will do what we want. Now, when we go back to our project, we'll see that in the maternity records project, we have the app file. What I've done before this lesson is to remove the if name equal to main, and I created a new file that I call wsgi.py, and I just put that there. Now, just import the app from the app file. From app, import app, and then if name equal to main app.run, we just remove that from here and we want to put it here. We imported the app here so we can have the definition of that app. So after this is done, you can push to your repository for you to be able to clone the most recent version. So that is the change I've made here. Another change we will make is on our utils file. When we create a user's account, we want this host. We want it to select the host, and the host that we have specified is localhost. And if we leave this on our environment file as localhost, then we begin to have problems with activation because we won't go to the correct link. But we will look at this at the end of the lesson. So the instance is created, and the next thing we want to do is to connect to this. So I will copy this, make sure on my terminal I am in the directory where my .pem file is saved, and then I will do this. Because I have not changed the permission for this key, and I want to come here and first of all chmod 400 that file first, and then I'll run SSH again, and this time it should connect successfully. Once done, let's update and upgrade first before we start installing what we need. So I'll do sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. We have a database side of this project, and we are putting both the database and the application on the same server. And so the next thing we want to do is to install MariaDB server so we can run my SQL secure installation. This was done in the last lesson, so I will rush over it. I just want to do the configuration in one run so that you can see how to do it correctly at once. So sudo apt-y install MariaDB server. We have sudo mysql secure installation. So we want to enter a new password for user root. We want to switch to unique socket authentication. Yes. Change root password. Let's say yes, and you put the new password. Remove anonymous users. Yes. Disallow root login remotely. I'll say no. Remove test database and access to it. I'll say yes. Reload privileges table. Yes. So take note that when you are building or when you want to make your project available on the internet, there are several security measures that you will take. That is in another course when we do advanced security, but for this is just enough for the purpose of this course. When this is done and we have MySQL installed, we want to create our database. Now in our environment file, we specify the database name maternity records, and that is what we want to create. So we want to go to MySQL shell. So we'll say MySQL u root p and then the password, and then we want to say create database maternity records. We have this created. When we say show databases, we have it created here. So we are done. We can now exit from here. Now it's time for us to clone our project from the repository. But before we can do this, we want to first of all generate SSH key. So I'm going to do SSH keygen and let it create one with a default name. I want to copy it, so I'll say cat /home/ubuntu/.sh/id ed25519.pub, and then I will copy this and I will go to my GitHub and I want to add new SSH key, and its title will be, let's say, maternity records, and I'll paste this key and add key. Now the key has been added. I want to come back to my terminal here and test, and then I should see you have successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shell access. Once you see this, all is well. It is time to clone, so we say git clone, and then we want to go back to our repository and clone that project. So we have here git clone this. So we've cloned this at the root of our Ubuntu home. So when I list, I have this clone here. So now I'm going to cd to the maternity records because I have it here. We might begin to get permission denied when we do something like git pull. Already up to date, so we're not having permission denied. But in the event you have permission denied, it means that Git is looking for your SSH keys at the root user and not Ubuntu user. And if you go through your notes, I left a note about how you will overcome the permission denied for public key message to be able to copy your SSH keys from the Ubuntu home to the root SSH directory. Okay, so we have this here, and when we list, we need to have our environment file first, and so we'll say sudo nano.env. We can copy this and paste here, so you will change the values of what your database password is, but the environment now is production, so we change here to production, and we can come here to add the password for local and production, and so we have that saved. So we've done that, created the environment file. It is time for us to now begin to install Poetry, and when we have Poetry, install all of our dependencies. So the first thing we want to do is to see how we can first of all install the repository for us to be able to install Poetry. We want to install Python venv first, so we can use that. So if I try to say I want to create a virtual environment, Python 3m venv.venv, I've not installed this, so I'll have an error that will ask me that this was not found. So sorry, this name is wrong. This was not found, and said I should install this first. So your first installation is going to be the venv. So we use sudo apt install python 3.12 venv, and we have that installed. And once this is installed, the next thing you want to do is to create a virtual environment, and let's do python 3 and venv.venv, and you can name your virtual environment any name you want. I chose to name .venv. So now I'll use dot. We use this dot just to be able to overcome the administration privilege error that we'll get. So dot space dot venv/bin/activate, and once activated you will see the name of your file here. We want to install Poetry. That we haven't done yet. We want to install Poetry, and we want to be able to add that to our environment path variable so we can install all our dependencies via Poetry. So let's say coil install.python poetry.org python 3. So once this is installed, we will now be able to run the export path, which it will give us in the message, and then we'll just copy it and paste. So we have it here in the message. If you don't do this, you will always have problems with your environment. So this is done. We have Poetry installed. So now it is time for us to install all our dependencies. So we can say Poetry install no root, and now we have everything installed. Always make sure you are in your project directory, your virtual environment is activated. You do this. We can also do Poetry update, so we can have all our dependencies updated to the latest version. So once we've done all of this, the next thing we want to do now is to start our configuration. We want to first of all use the firewall. We want to use uncomplicated firewall package, and let's use this to install that. So we'll say sudo apt install ufw. I didn't do this in the last class, but we're just doing it now. And what we use this ufw to do, once enabled, we want to allow certain ports, and whatever port is not allowed in the rule is not going to allow connection to those ports. So we use sudo ufw allow and specify the port we want to allow. We want to allow SSH connection, which is on port 22 by default. You specify the port if you change your SSH port. Then we have sudo ufw allow. Flags usually runs on port 5000 by default, so we allow that port. We can just look at the status. Port 80 is for HTTP and 443 is for HTTPS. But when we enable all of Nginx services, I think those will be enabled automatically. So let's leave it at this. When we have problems, we'll come and enable. So when we do sudo ufw enable, it means that any connection we have that is not allowed is going to be terminated. And we can look at the status here, sudo ufw status, and then we see where it's allowed, port 22, port 5000 allowed from anywhere. So now that we've done this, we have our firewall for those ports allowed. The next thing we want to do to make this application available on the internet, we have already cloned the application, so it will now be easy for us to just try to run this application locally to see if it works fine. Then we'll now try to run it with Gunicorn, and then we will see if we have the correct output, and then we'll be ready to configure Gunicorn and then the Nginx for us to be able to have it on the site. So we already created a WSGI file, and when we list here, we want to make sure all our files are here correctly and up to date. If not, you want to push from your local environment to GitHub and pull into your production environment. Now that we have this, let's just try to run this locally. And when you want to run locally, you just use python 3 and that index file, which we have as wsgi.py. So we have it running, and it tells us it's running on port 5000 here. So everything is running well, which means it already created our table that we specified, table users. So let me close this, and let's try it with Gunicorn. And we use bind 0.0.0.0 and port 5000, and then we'll do wsgi app So the name of your index file, app. And so it is running as expected. So the outputs are correct. Up until this point, we have no errors. Everything is well. So what we want to do now is to create a service file, since we now know that things are working well, and we want to do that we'll do Ctrl+C to exit from here. We'll do that in the etc directory. So we'll say sudo nano /etc /systemd/system/ let's call this my project. So we'll call it my project.service. In this file, we want to add the unit, and this unit section will specify the metadata and dependencies for the unit. And so we'll just put unit, and let's do the metadata. Let's just write description is equal to Gunicorn instance. Let's say to serve my project. Let's just do it like this, and we'll put after. And when we put after, network.target just indicates that the unit starts after the network is up. So this will ensure that network connectivity is up before the service starts. So we'll say after is equal to network.target, and then we want to now specify the service. We just want to define all of the parameters for the service, and we have the user is equal to Ubuntu, and then we want to have the group it belongs to is www data, and then the working directory is equal to /home/ubuntu/maternity records is the name of our project. And then we want the environment. We'll specify let's say path is equal to /ubuntu/maternity records /.venv/bin. So this is where our virtual environment is located. If your virtual environment is named something else, you want to change this .venv to whatever you named your virtual environment. So let's do the exec tag. So, and we want to now do the exec start, which when we use that, we just want to specify how it will run the Gunicorn from that environment, and the number of workers, and how we want to bind this, and also set the permission. So let's do it this way. We did it differently. So these are the files you change from the last lesson. This particular file, we did it differently to simulate error in the last lesson. So this is /home/ubuntu. Now /home/ubuntu is my username. If your username is something else, you want to use that name in place of Ubuntu. And we have maternity record /.venv/bin/Gunicorn, and then we want to use the workers flag. Let's set it to 3. So it's workers. We want to set it to 3, and then we want to bind. My project is the name. So I want this to be created in the root directory, my project.m, and then we want to set that permission to allow access there, and WSGI is that entry file. And now we want to put the install path, and the only thing we'll write here is wanted by equal to multi-user.target, and this install section just defines the installation information for the unit. And when we specify let's say multi-user.target, what this does is that it specifies the target into which the unit should be installed. In this case, when we set it to this value, the service should start automatically during system boot. So all this has done now is just to set up Gunicorn to serve Flask application with all of these configurations. Now if we have an error, we'll come back to debug this to see if there's anything we specified wrongly here. So we'll Ctrl+X, yes, to save, and once it's saved, we want to start that service. So we'll say sudo systemctl start. The name of the service is my project, so start my project. Then we want to enable it. Sudo systemctl enable my project. If for those editing the last lesson, you want to first of all do the daemon reload first, because we made changes, so you don't start without you reloading. Okay, and if you start afresh from scratch, I would advise you to follow the first lesson, make errors, be able to navigate through error logs before you come back to do it correctly. You can start afresh by creating a new instance and do it correctly, or edit the last one with the values that we have changed in this configuration file. So we'll say sudo systemctl, and let's look at the status of my project, and let's make sure all is well. And all is well, is running well enabled. We have to see it looking exactly like this for us to know that we have done this correctly. Now that we've done this, we have the last part, which is to install and configure Nginx. So let's say sudo apt install Nginx, and if this is successful, we want to now create the configuration for this. Now it is located in the etc/nginx/site available/my project. Now if I create this my project here, we'll have a problem. I can decide to simulate the error for you to see, but since we already know where the error logs are, let's just go straight to the point, and we want to just go into that directory. So first of all, let's look at the directory. Let's cd into etc/nginx/site available. Now if we list this, we'll see that it has one file called default. This is what Nginx runs by default. If we come here to our instance and we come to the public, let's come there to the maternity records, and let's look at the public IPv4 address. Okay, we come to the public IPv4 address. Let's open the DNS instead. You first want to make sure it's not HTTPS, because we didn't have that configured, and we want to see welcome to Nginx or something about Nginx. So continue, and we need to make sure it says that. So now it's not continuing to port 80 yet. Yeah, but to get the point, when you click on this, it should actually take you to, let's go back and then let's try it again. So I'll let it load with HTTPS. It's not available, and then we'll come back there. Now when you begin to have problems like this, it means that the firewall might be preventing us from going in. So let's look at this. Let's say sudo, let's just add it to UFW, or we can just add the allow the whole Nginx full. So we can say sudo UFW allow, and we'll have Nginx full like this, and this should sudo systemctl restart Nginx. So this is done, and let's see whether it will allow us here now. So make sure you remove the S for HTTP, and we have to see welcome to Nginx. So that's what the firewall does. We have not allowed it to connect to port 80, but now we allow it to for all the Nginx services, and then it allows us. So now that we've done that, we see that Nginx is installed and is okay. What we want to do is to change that default file configuration. You can create a new file here and then just change your configuration to point to that, but I'm going to edit this default file instead of creating a new one. So previously I wanted to just create a new one called my project, but in order not to get you confused or give you more configuration, let's just do sudo nano default. And then on this default file, we want to change it. What I'll do is I'll just delete everything on this file. So now I've deleted everything that is not commented out, and so I want to just write this code server, and let's listen on port 80. Let's say listen, and want to listen on port 80. Remember your semicolon, and then we want to put server name, and you want this server name to be the IP address of the public IPv4 address for your server. So let's go there and let's look at the public IPv4 address. We'll copy this and we come back here and we're going to paste this here. Then put a semicolon, and then we want to now set there's the location / and here we want to just put the proxy parameter. So let's say include proxy param. So this is similar to what we did in the last lesson. You can just edit that file. So 2 files that you just need to edit if you are working from the last lesson, or you start afresh if you get confused. So we'll do proxy pass HTTP. Now we want to, let's use Unix, and let's make this easier. You can always use HTTP and the IP address. Sometimes this gets confusing because it might be running on a different port. Okay, and so we'll put Ubuntu / maternity records. Right, so we'll have Unix home Ubuntu, maternity records is the name, and we created my project was the name of the service file we created. So say my project.soc like this, and let's put a semicolon, and I think this is all the configuration we need. I'm going to Control X, save, and this is saved, and we want to restart Nginx, and once we restart that, we should be able to see our project on the internet. But before we do that, let's enable to test for errors. First of all, you need to be able to create a symbolic link, and we want this in the site enabled directory because we did this in the site available directory. So we'll do that like this: sudo link s/etc/ Nginx / site available / my project. So the name of our, and then we want to go /etc/ Nginx / site enable. Okay, this already exists. Let's say my project, and this is done. So this step, if you already exist, you might not need to create it, or you want to create a new one, assuming you have a file called my project here and not the default one. So take note, once you have this already exists, you might not need to create this symlink, because what we have is already a default file which was symlinked by default. If you had a new project or a new configuration file here, let's say called my project, then you're going to symlink this my project here. So this is just for those who created something new that is not the default. You don't need this if you are working on the default file. Okay, so let's restart now and hope all is well. Sudo systemctl restart Nginx. We have an error, so let's see what the error is. So the conf test failed, and it failed because let's see, no such file or directory here. This one we will try to do. There's no file called my project. So I did that for those that have a different file they're working with. So I'm going to Control C to leave here, and we can just create, let's say, sudo nano default, and I can just copy this and sudo nano my project and paste this here. It's pasted with all the other lines. I'm going to delete all of these things I copied. The top has the code, so you get the point. So let's just do this just to show others that you can work without the default file. And because I already did that for sample, it's going to give me an error. So when we go up here, we can see that we copied everything apart from the server that we need to copy. So let's just do that again here. So this copied that, it didn't copy the configuration that we want to have there. So let's listen on port. So let's listen on port 80. So let's say server. So this is exactly what we did. You don't need this step if your file is the default. So let's say listen 80, and then we have server name is going to be the IPv4 address here. Let's copy it again. Let's put a semicolon. So the address we want is the public, not the private. So we did the private here, so we have to copy the public. So it is the other one, because I'm guessing I made the same mistake there. And now we have location, and the location we want just to include proxy params, and then we want to proxy pass http unix home ubuntu maternity records /myproject.sub, and then we save this. Yes, and let me do sudo nano default and make sure this is the public, not the private IPv4 address. So it was good we saw this. So this is done. Let's try to restart let's try to restart Nginx, not the service. So we still have an error. Let's see what the error is. Test fail unknown directive. Can't read this properly. Let me expand it more. So unknown directly / in etc. So / in what file? I want to see what file this is in the site enabled line 34 on default. So you can see this. So it says sudo nano default. Okay, and that's the beginning. Let's see if we have that in the other one. Nope. So this is okay. So now we can restart Nginx. We still have an error. Unknown directive GNU. Okay, so what's going on here is that I copied and pasted. Let's delete everything that is not this one. So we need to delete this. So when you copy and paste, that's the problem. So you can actually just delete everything and then make sure that all your file is there. But it's good this happens, so you can see how to debug this file when you refuse to restart. And that's why it's always good to restart. So if it's restarted, it goes to the next line like this. You have no problem. So now it is the moment of truth for us to see if this actually works. One thing I think we might get will be a gateway error that will lead to some permission problems, and that is an easy fix. If we don't have that, so let's refresh this and we'll have the gateway error. And let's go to cd var log nginx, and then when we do sudo nano error.log, we should see that we have the error that has to do with permission. So let's see. Okay, let's look at what is. Let's see if it's a permission denied error, and that will be an easy fix. If not, we have to look at, yes, permission denied error. So once you get this error, it's an easy fix. We just have to do sudo chmod like this, and let's just do 775. This might not be the best method, but you get it working for your practice. And once this is done, let's restart Nginx again. And let's refresh our page. We should see our home page, and your configuration is done. Now this is the DNS address for your site. This is the DNS address you will submit for your site when you're asked to submit your configuration. Now we have another problem. When we try to register a new user, let me register one, lovelyie@gmail.com, and I'll choose admin and submit. It will register successfully, but I need to get an activation email. So I'm going to come here, refresh. I got an activation email, and I have a problem with the link it sent, which is localhost. I didn't edit this in my environment file to change the host to be the IP address. You can come here. If you click on this link, they will have a problem not found. What you can do, a short method, is to copy this address, come back to where it was not found. From the local host, you delete it and put that, and then you get to the correct page to set. Alternatively, you want to come to your environment file. So let's go back there and let's do cd maternity records, and then we'll say sudo nano.env, and we want to change database host from localhost here to the IPv4 address. So we want to remove all of the // and the scheme HTTP. So let's see if this works, and let us, I don't think we need to restart, but let's just do that for doing sake. So once we restarted successfully, we'll see the next prompt. We can change the password for this. Let's put the password, and then we'll try to create a new account. This is activation successful. So we are hoping that when we come to our database, we should see this in the users table. And let's say use maternity records, and then let's select all from users. So everything is as expected, encrypted, and we can find that row of information. But on the utils file here, where we have settings.dbhost here, so let's see what we change. And we say database host production, but it's easier to just here we can just put instead of the DB host here, what we're going to put here now will just be our IPv4 DNS, the public IPv4 DNS. So this is where we end this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to now look at what happens when a user who has an activated account successfully logs in to the system. Thank you, and see you in the next lesson.